The meeting we had last week was very productive. We talked in length about the building committee recommendations and recording them for the Board of Selectmen, or to be presented to the Board of Selectmen. Not necessarily everything that was recorded in the meeting, but what we would present to the Board of Selectmen at the end of this month. I believe their next meeting is somewhere around the 26th. Can you verify that, please, Jeannie? Maybe she's disappeared.
She mentioned that she's running 2 meetings tonight.
Oh, she's running 2 meetings.
Yeah.
Okay. I can, there is a meeting near the end of the month, it's either the 26th or the 28th of the Board of Selectmen. And at the conclusion of our meeting last week, it was recommended that we move up any presentation or any recommendations we have, and at least have them available to them for the next meeting, their next meeting, which is the end of this month, which is in about it's in a couple of well, yeah, it's in about a week and a half or so.
It's the 29th, Joe.
Pardon?
It's the 29th.
29th. Okay, so it's actually 2 weeks from today then. The recommendations were prepared by Mark, and we could go over those today. The reason I called for a special meeting is that we had a quorum. We actually had 4 people on, but we were missing Dave, Joe Paradiso, and AJ. And without that, without a larger, to get the input from a larger number of our committee, I asked that we call a special meeting for the day after the school, the day after school opens, or the day that school opens after the vacation. Dave Spurley is still on he's either on a plane or he's just landed, and he will be unable to make the meeting, but we'll have AJ and Joe here in addition to what we had at our last meeting. That would be the end of my chair's comments. We can move to new business. I'll turn the meeting over to, I don't see Mark. Brian, are you standing in for, or Tom? Is someone standing in for Mark to present the information that we developed at the meeting and then got again today, a revised edition or a revised version from Mark? Oh, there's Mark.
Hey, everyone.
Actually,
I'm sorry, I just joined Joe.
Okay.
We're talking about the revised updated spreadsheet that we shared at the last building committee meeting.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So, John, can you share your screen? And I just simply
certainly
updated the column that we focused in on last week. So, as a reminder, top to bottom, we have the scopes of work identified. We have building construction. Go down, John. Go down. I'm not going to go down to the groupings. We have building construction. The next section. Can you go to the next page?
No, okay. I thought you were going to go through each of those.
No, I'm not going to go through each of them. Just the major headings.
All right.
So we have building construction. The next grouping was, I believe, site
Construction. Correct.
Construction, and then we had markups. And we have the subtotal. We had escalation. And that green row represented what the construction value of each option scenario was. The light blue represents the original construction budget and where we were relative to on or over budget. And then we include the FF&E value, which we said was available. I did reduce in column D the FF&E to $200,000. I believe that was at John's suggestion to represent if we're doing less scope, there would be less FF&E. So that came down. So if you go back up to the top of the first page, We had the various options, and column E represents the outcome of last week's meeting, where we said these are the things that we would probably keep. I did revise the enhanced performance spaces to be all inclusive. So that 479, 200 includes the gymnasium stage, the bleachers, and the recital stage work. Everything else pretty much stayed the same. The next page, I don't know if there was anything that changed there. Nope.
I don't think
Again,
so.
we just followed the recommendation of, we had the reduced site upgrades and patio scope, the 450,000. And then the other markups down below. So you can see this iteration represents a $15.7 million, 15,767, or 3.586 million over the current budget.
Mark, it looks like those numbers track identically to column B. Is there any delta between those two?
No, the only thing I did differently, AJ, is I just worded the performance bases together. But you're right. I mean, that was essentially what the committee's decision was a few weeks ago, and it largely hasn't changed.
Okay.
So I created that column. I don't know if you were there, AJ, or not. I don't remember.
I wasn't there last week.
Yeah, if
so-
there were going to be any changes, but the consensus was what was discussed. And if you go back up to the page one, John, I forget the date.
Sure.
March 19th.
March 19th.
Yeah, that largely is the same scope.
Hey, Mark, on the FF&E for column D, do we know that that's what's required for those 3 spaces that were going to be improved, or was that just a plug number?
It's a plug number. We'd have to go through the details and John and figure out what exactly we would spend, but we just sort of took a percentage. If we're taking out youth and family services, taking out beach and rec, you would have less areas. So there'd be some FF&E for some use of the building. So we'd figure out how to spend $200,000, John, in that building.
Yeah, just a suggestion, before we present it to the board, we probably want to get that to net out to 0 and move any funds up into the building construction area.
Oh, we did. I did add $500,000 worth of scope, John, to
Okay, because it
some of the
says
finishes, the flooring, the painting. You know, some of
It's
those
here.
got enhanced or additional dollars.
but there's a 200K balance at the bottom on page 2.
Yeah, that would
Yes, that was
suggest
left.
if you were gonna include all of it, you know, if you spend the $200,000 in the project, there's no surplus.
Got it. Okay.
Any questions on this?
Joe, I guess it doesn't sound like we're making any different decisions than we made at the March 19th meeting.
The
So,
going forward, instructions are different. This, you are correct. This is the scope that we identified March 19th. We've gone through a couple of times with the board, and I think they've in general have agreed with what we have recommended for the scope. We haven't had any considerable pushback on what our recommended scope is. Now they may not have seen all the numbers yet, but that is this is what we identified earlier. This is what we have talked about now in board meetings and board of selectmen meetings, and there has not been a significant pushback. What has changed is a plan which isn't finalized yet for going forward. So if everyone's kind of comfortable from in understanding what is here in the page, maybe we can talk a bit about what's the going forward.
Yeah.
Okay,
Uh,
Mark, Mark or Tom, do you want to talk about the, the bid strategy or the possibility of how any of these options will play, how we would play those into a bid strategy?
Well, we could start with, I'll give you my opinion, Tom, then you can add yours. We could further define, develop the documents based upon the base scope of work, column D. We could continue to develop the additional spaces that fall under column E, like the playground. I'm looking at that one for $225,000, right? That could, in theory, be bid as an alternate. So we could put a playground, bubble it, and say this is an add alternate. If we don't have, this is all assuming we don't have a commitment of the 3.586 additional dollars. If that was going to fall, after we give Tom the green light to proceed, and we don't have the dollars, we can always pull it back. So again, we could further advance the youth and family services space, beach and rec, and just identify that you don't want to have a lot of alternates. You don't want to have, a dozen or 2 dozen, but we could group a lot of those major chunks into add alternates and have the bidders provide us a bid based upon column D, and add alternates for the scopes identified in column E, like the patio and the site amenities. Those could be bid as alternates.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that was maybe I could present it just a little more succinctly. If you go with which is the zero,
D,
what
column D,
what column is
D.
is the budget?
that one.
That
D.
was what,
This
not
one
what,
here,
what is that though? D?
Yeah,
column
can you
D.
go up to page 1, Tom, or John? Flip that to me.
Okay. If you start with the column D, and Tom does, well, first, you have column D and column E. Column D would be if we get no additional, if we at some point have no additional dollars. Column E, the delta in column E would be what we could do with additional monies. So I believe what we were looking to do today is to authorize the construction documents to be started by Tom, and in a way that all the original dollars in column D get put into a single package, and that any additional scope that's in column E also gets completed. Construction documents get completed, and they're put into buckets of add alternates, as Mark said, half a dozen or so. So the basic scope D would be the heart of the first part of the bid package, and the deltas between D and E would be add alternates. But all of those would be begun. The drawings for those would be begun immediately, essentially, as soon as Tom could start. Would that be? Am I on track with that, Mark and Tom?
Yes, the one thing that we talked about, Joe, that would need to be figured out is youth and family services. So Tom has already developed the space based upon the original program, through schematic design development. There was a discussion about maybe reducing the overall, area that youth and family services will occupy, maybe reducing it. So what Tom doesn't want to do, and I want to speak for Tom, is further advance an area that may get truncated in the short time, in the very near future.
And the town is meeting on that this week. Al, are you involved in that? Is that but that's coming up this week with a fairly large group, and if I don't have the complete list of people here, but if Scott or Austin are on, I believe you could confirm that's going to be this week. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe that is correct. And as I understand, the selectmen are encouraging you to move ahead at this point and erect uh, uh, the basic building, the functional building, and we, the selectmen, will then decide whether we can provide additional funding now or at some point in the future. Am I answering your question, Joe?
I think what you did was reinforce my original statement.
Oh,
But
okay.
what Mark said was that there is still some uncertainty in the Madison Beach and Rec specifically their design of their office space. So that would be something that might be left for last, or
Was it Beach and Rec or Youth and Family Services, Joe? I thought it was Youth and Family Services.
Probably Youth and Family Services.
what did I say? I didn't say Madison Youth and Family Services.
You said Madison Beach and Rec.
Oh, no,
That's what I
Madison
heard.
Youth and Family Services.
Okay,
Sorry. That is the largest space that's still not fully agreed upon within inside the town. And that would be something that will be that's being worked on and will be worked through, but maybe not in time for this meeting if we do decide to vote to begin construction documents, but would be something that would be resolved fairly quickly.
is
Yes.
it possible, Joe? I'm sorry, Joe. Is it possible, Joe and Al, that the board won't advance the conversation or the process for seeking additional $3.5 million?
I think it's going to be a question mark of when, whether we want to do it at this point in time or whether we are seeing this as a longer term series of enhancements over a period of years. I think that's the decision the board will want to reach perhaps on the 29th, but the instructions that we've issued so far is to proceed ahead with the construction documents and continue on getting ready to go out to bid.
Including, Al, the scope that's identified in the additional $3.5 million?
No, we're at 15.9 right now.
Okay.
And that's what the instructions are. Proceed on that, and the selectmen will quickly decide whether there's going to be additional monies at this point in time.
Okay, so that's different. I want to make sure that we're clear that we're only
Yeah,
proceeding with column B.
Al, I'm not sure that was the last information I got. So let's just say that may let's just say that will be something that the Board of Selectmen and the Madison, as the Madison town, has to decide. Because the last information I had was that we would go ahead with all the construction documents, and then have the 15.9 would be one package, and then the additional 3 million essentially would be a series of ad alternates, because the town may decide to go with the additional funds as soon as a referendum, which could be which is still at this point undetermined. Could be this summer, it could be with the next at the general election, or it could be in parts over a longer period of time.
I think you and I are saying the same thing, Joe. You're probably saying it better.
Okay, so just so we're clear, when Tom's given the green light to proceed, he can proceed with Beach and Rec and some version of Youth and Family Services in the clear story and everything that's included in column E. And we'll figure out a bidding strategy in terms of identifying alternates to control the pricing.
Oh, yeah, that has to all be packaged in a very specific way, it sounds like. Like, we need to have construction documents that show a building for
yeah.
15.9,
Yeah, exactly.
and then we need to show packages that add on to that.
Correct. Yes.
Yes.
And
Now,
and developing which of those line items that are shown to a fine, to a fine point at this point, may not be constructive because we're going to get another estimate before we go out for bids.
Correct.
So when we get the next level of estimates, then the dollars will be clearer on how much 15.9 is and how much is over 15.9. And then the packages can be segregated.
I imagine we need to have some sense of prioritization though, right?
Well, unlike Massachusetts, AJ, you don't have to necessarily come up with a priority list. You may as a group. Massachusetts requires you to go 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can't choose 2 without choosing 1, and you can't choose 4 without 3, 2, and 1. Here, you're right. You could choose which of the 4 or 5 you want internally as a group.
Now,
Be thankful you're not Massachusetts, because that is much tougher to navigate.
help me understand, at least in my personal life, when we do construction, we see when I ask builders for things, I see a lot of efficiency gained from larger projects versus smaller ones, right? So asking a flooring contractor to do half a building versus a whole building, I would expect to see a lower per square foot cost for a larger project. So to a certain point, is there something that the town has to factor in there when we're trying to like divvy this work up? Because guaranteeing a flooring contractor 10,000 square feet and guaranteeing them 40,000 square feet, I would expect 2 different competitive bids out of that process.
Yeah, there's an efficiency, to having a larger footprint for sure. But, and maybe the cost per square foot is less in a larger area. But what's driving it is not the cost per square foot, it's the total cost. So I don't know if there's a magic wand or a formula that you can say, okay, you want to meet this amount of square footage for it to be worth your while. If we could only do 10,000 square feet of flooring, because that's all we can afford, that's all we're going to bid, would we get a better unit rate for 50,000 square feet? Yes, but it'll cost you.
It sounds like we're going to ask for both bids though. We're going to ask, to keep this flooring example, we're going to ask the flooring contractor to tell us how much would it cost for 10, how much would it cost for 40.
Yeah, well, we're gonna not really necessarily. We're
Right.
gonna say include in the base bid carpeting for these spaces, right? Rooms A, B, C, D. Add alternate for carpet and F, G, H, I.
So I guess my question is, if you do it that way, if you ask the contractors for 2 bids, will the addition of bid 1 plus bid 2 be roughly equivalent to what it would have been if you just said do the whole thing? Or would you expect that because you split it into an add alternate, that their markups might be higher, or that you might see different pricing in that scenario?
Yeah, I mean, again, if you break, so there's still going to be overhead charges and general condition costs that you're going to have to pay, whether it's 10,000 square feet or 50,000 square feet. So spread out over a larger, that general conditions is lower. So there's definitely an economies of scale by doing it that way. But, at the end of the day, the 2 should equal what it would be if we just said, give us 50,000 square feet off the hook.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know, Tom or John or Alicia, you've been doing this enough. I don't know if you guys have any different thoughts or opinions. I mean, it's a surgical approach, essentially, to getting a bid that aligns with the budget.
Yeah, I mean, I would say at least in the residential approach, most of the time it's just, I mean, your material costs are going to be your material cost, right? Like a toilet fixture costs the same whether you're doing 10 of them or 2 of them. You do see economies of scales when you're doing certain applied finishes. Like if you were going to do a polished concrete floor, that gets cheaper as you go bigger, which is why all the big warehouses do that. But in general, it's mainly going to be your material costs are going to stay relatively the same. It's the labor costs that are going to fluctuate, especially if it's broken up into phases as well, because then you have to remobilize your installers and all of that. But in general, I think your material costs, whether you're scaling up or down, are relatively the same, except for some very specific type finishes and materials that you're buying. Does that make sense, Mark?
Yes, yeah. Again, it's we don't really get into the weeds of the contractors business. You know, but when we're talking to estimators, you know, they'll tell us that, you know, it'll cost you a little bit less the larger footprint you have, but not enough to where you're going to want to do AJ, you know, 100% of the building versus 20% of the building. You'll never catch up.
The main reason I'm driving at this point is because when we present numbers to Al in the town, and we say it's $1 million to do it this way, plus $1 million if you want to do the rest of the building. But if you decide to do that later, that $1 million might turn into 1.2 or 1.3.
Well,
right?
so the biggest thing to factor into if you do it later is inflation, and the cost of materials go up, and who knows what labor rates are. So the longer you wait, the more likely you are to have it be more expensive if you do it 2 years later versus doing it all together.
You're going to want a contract for it now, not in, like to Felicia's point. If you decide to do the other 80% in 2 years, you're right, it will cost more because of escalation.
All the prices we have today are invalidated at that point, because we can't go to the town and say it's going to cost $3 million 2 years from now to add this stuff. It's not. It's going to cost a different price.
Our pricing exercise, AJ, is for this project today or essentially 6 months when we get bids.
Yeah.
The best outcomes. The best outcomes, we put we do the construction drawings, we put the bid, we put it out to bid with this strategy. Somewhere either at the time we're going out to bid, or maybe just a little after, the town can then make a decision on will we be able to get more funds or not. So if we can get more funds, then we might be able to award the full contract or some larger portion of the contract than just the 15.9 portion, and then we would then have to somehow escalate whatever the balance is for like a 2 year out. But the timing could be in our favor if the town can act soon enough to make a decision on if we're going to get more funds or not. And certainly the addition of a second grant should make that a pretty compelling story for the town to vote to make this to do it essentially all at once, or as much as all at once as we can do it, so that we can we can take advantage of the grant money. I should say there was one more step, and it should not be a difficult step, but if we're to go to the board, and the board is going to go in front of the public, the list that Mark gave us is great for the committee. I think we understand the segments of it, but it does not fully describe what the building is going to look like with these dollar amounts. So a narrative or a description in some way that says for this, for this you get carpeting on the floors and you get painting, but you don't get the lower level, which gets abated and is going to look rough. And what abated looks like is this, and what finished look like is this, and you'll get an elevator and whatever. At each level we'd have to make a description that is more more words than dollars. And that's something that if we agree to go forward here, that we have a couple of weeks to do.
That makes sense. I mean, the shell of the building won't change either way, right? It looks the same regardless of which option we pick as a town. It's just what we get on the
Between
inside
D
and
and
some of the
E,
site
yes.
work.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's what the inside that what's inside is what's going to get the most attention from the public. They'll walk right by the outside and, you know, that looks great. But when you go inside, will you see, you know, finished spaces, or will you see rough walls, rough floors? And hopefully we might see some of the period floors saved and part of the remodeling process. So we're that would be our goal by the next meeting of the Board of Selectmen. And then we have a meeting, I think we have a meeting just before that. I'm not in my calendar, but I
I
don't know.
mean,
if
this is a special meeting, so we have one next week, I think, on the books.
Yeah, the 23rd.
So we have a meeting on the 23rd. The next town
Yeah.
meeting is the 29th. So we have another shot at this. But I did want to get this reviewed and move forward if we can today. So if we're going to do it, I would need a motion to authorize QA&M to proceed with the construction documents. I think that's what we need here, and I guess I'll ask Tom and Brian and Mark, is that the next action you'd be waiting for from the committee?
I would say yes.
Yep.
Okay,
Does anything change? Would anything change our decision after the Board of Selectmen meeting versus before? I mean, we're talking 2 weeks, so, or a week and a half. Is it worth waiting to make that determination for CD, or are we
No.
not going to learn anything new and we might as well do it now?
The only area we might get some feedback on is the extent of the tenant fit out for the offices. If there's a change, there's a change. We'll deal with it. But moving forward, sooner rather than later, we'll ultimately condense the schedule and hopefully get you to bid right in the fall, which is a good time to bid.
okay. Do I have a motion to authorize the QA&M to proceed with construction documents?
So moved.
Second,
Any additional discussion? Questions? Comments?
There was just one thing that I wanted to bring to your attention, since I've been in the building recently, the front entrance area, in that auditorium space, significantly more water damage and crumbling plaster than, post-referendum 2 years ago, which makes sense given the weather conditions. But I just wanted to bring that to your attention if it's something that just needs to be looked at from a structural engineer, because I think when we first went through the building, that was in pretty good shape. So just, you know, for full disclosure, it looks like there's some significant rot going on there that might need to be addressed on a larger scale than originally thought.
Alicia, we did a walkthrough. T. Connolly did a walkthrough at Bill McMinn's request of the roof. And we
Yep.
identified some areas of concern, and I thought he was gonna have some patching and repairs done.
So we did do patching and repairs. The majority of it was to the 1930s edition specifically. There was a lot of water damage in the gym area that was stopped. but that front area wasn't addressed because at the time it wasn't too much of an issue. I think what's happened with just the constant rain and wet we've had in the last year, and this is something I'm seeing down in the subterranean level as well. All of the gutters are off the building, so whatever, leader drains were there to direct it away from the foundation are completely gone. So because it's just been constantly raining, it hasn't had time to dry out, and as a result, it's just really spalling and starting to fall apart a lot more than what, the bones are brittle. It's not dry anymore. So it's really starting to show a lot of that wet impact a lot more than it did 2 years ago. So just wanted to bring that up as somebody who's seen sort of the progression of the building. The bones are still good, but that plaster and that underlying timber is damp to the touch.
Is it possible that we can get a patch job done in that area?
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mark. I had Munger Construction out there, and
Yeah.
they did about a day's worth of work in that whole section.
Okay, good. Thanks.
All right.
Thanks, Peter.
Yeah, and then hopefully if it's patched up, it'll dry out and then we can take a look at,
Yeah.
what the substructure looks like once it's dried out.
I also asked Peter to look at removing the vegetation from the from the immediate perimeter of the building. So
Yeah,
that once
Yep,
it's
we're gonna take care of that. The guys are busy with the fields right now. They're gonna
Oh, yeah.
that is the next on the list. So
okay. So that'll help yeah, keep it drier as we go forward. Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion? Raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye, okay, looks like we have 5 votes here. Dave is not here. Joan previously indicated that she was in favor of doing this. So we can note that the motion passed 5-0, was unanimous for the people here. But as a note, Joan had looked at Joan was at our last meeting and indicated she was in favor of going this way. And I will be contacting Dave separately to see if he has any further information or he has any doubts or anything that he needs to add. But I think we're going forward. I think we have the vote to go forward. Thank you, everyone. Since this is a special meeting, I can't ask for any additional any additional items. So the only thing I can ask is if Jeannie, if anyone's on from the public who would like to comment, we will take public comment at this time.
There is somebody, I will promote them.
Jim, you're promoted. Can we have your name and your address?
Sure, it's Jim Schmaltz, Jonathan's Landing.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks. Just had a couple of questions on, like you were talking about moving the vegetation from in front there or around the building. There's the lead contamination. Is that going to be addressed at the same time, or? I'm not sure you'll be able to just, dig out those plants if there's, lead in that soil.
I think I think that's noted. Tom, we don't have to, we are not obligated to.
I just wanted to say that in regards to any potential contamination, our LEP will be advising us during the construction document phase as to what the work plan is going to be. So that's something that will be developed in the next phase of documentation.
Will there be a new estimate for abatement? It looks like on the current estimates that you have, they're just allowances. They're not actually any estimates. And the estimate from before was substantially higher. It was almost 900,000. It didn't include any of the interior lead abatement. You talked about repointing the brick. There's asbestos in the brick on the older section of the building. all of the flooring is all asbestos. You know, it just seems like that's a very large number that isn't, you know, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe you do have it accounted for, you know, but you know, it seems like you're probably at least $1 million off if you're estimating $500,000 there.
Joe, if I can inform the committee, I would just point out that, the whole goal of the construction document phase is to raise the level of the detailing of the project and again, identify updated costs for the project. If we can get a better handle on all aspects of the project, including any environmental issues, that would be a part of this next phase of work.
Yeah, Tom, I thought, John, didn't you say that we were getting an updated estimate from Paulson O'Neill? Did you, or did it, or maybe I was thinking.
Yes, I believe they are working on that, Mark, correct?
Okay, so Jim, we'll have an updated estimate. And again, one of the reasons why the number's less is because there was a significant amount of work that was related to the building being completely demolished and foundation waterproofing. But since that's not happening, we don't need to include that scope. But we'll get an updated estimate based upon what we're actually doing.
Because it seems like you need to give that to, you know, when you're getting cost, because it's going to change what their starting point of what they have, you know.
Mhm.
If they're looking at a smooth floor versus something that's just destroyed, you know, all of that, all the interior walls, all the trim, you know, all the architectural details, everything, you know, will either be gone or have to be painstakingly taken care of.
Jim, thank you for your comment.
All right, thank you.
Jeannie, any other hands raised?
There are no other hands raised.
So thank you, everyone. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Cheers all.
Take care, everyone.